one of those one, for example, like it seems to work in altering perception of effort when you start being tired. Like we were talking before about this positive self-talk. Okay, positive self-talk is actually working.
The Triathlon Show 207. Hey, what's up everybody, and welcome back to another episode of That Triathlon Show, the podcast presented by scientifictriathlon.com. I'm your host Michael, and in this episode I interview Walter Staiano, who is a PhD, researcher and a neuroperformance consultant from Italy, working at the University of Valencia. And we discuss topics like mindfulness in athletic performance, mental fatigue, as well as brain endurance training. I think it's an absolutely fascinating topic or set of topics, and it was a great chat with Walter. So we'll get right into it after thanking our sponsors, Precision Hydration, that you can find on precisionhydration.com. It's winter, and in the Northern Hemisphere at least, and the base training is upon us. A lot of indoor riding. I just got off the bike from a 3-hour ride, and I sweated buckets, to say the least, and had to basically mop the floor after that. And fortunately, I had a lot of good hydration with me, including a couple of 500 milliliter bottles of Precision Hydration. I use pH 1000 generally in my training rides, even though I might actually go to pH 1500 sometimes. But either way, if you do long and hard rides like the one that I just did, then your performance can actually start to fall apart if you don't take care of the electrolyte intake that you have. Because when you sweat, you might be losing a lot of electrolytes. The sweat sodium concentration is very individual. So that is something that Precision Hydration helps you figure out with their free hydration plan. You can find it on their website, and that consists of a simple quiz with 10 questions. You just fill them out, and then you get a suggestion for how to hydrate in your racing and even training. So check that out, and if you want to try your first box or tube of electrolytes for free, use the promo code THATTRIATHLONSHOW, all one word, all caps, on precisionhydration.com. And big thanks to Roka, that you can find on roka.com. If quality matters a lot to you and you want the best of the best, then rest assured that Roka is a company that puts their money where their mouth is and invests heavily in R&D and wants to make sure that whenever they release a product, it's going to take that product category up a significant amount and be better than any of the alternatives that are out there. So that started with the wetsuit line of Roka, but has now grown into including things like tri-suits, swim skins, and a lot of eyewear even more recently in the last couple of years. So check out all that Roka has to offer and get 20% off these super high quality products with the promo code TTS, all caps. Without any further ado, here's my interview with Dr. Walter Staiano. So welcome to that triathlon show, Walter. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. Thank you. Thank you very much, Michael, to invite me here to speak.
It's a pleasure. I found you, actually, I didn't tell you, but I found you through Alex Hutchinson's column, Sweat Science. That's when he wrote about mindfulness in athletes and some research that you had been working on. And we'll get into that. But before we do, can you give us an introduction of yourself and who you are?
Yeah, my name is Walter Staiano. I'm actually at the moment a researcher at the University of Valencia in Spain, and I'm also like a sport consultant for elite athletes in Europe mainly, and I also work as a neuroperformance consultant for like neurotech applications, like for companies that are interested into moving into the neurotechnology of a sport or physical activity. And so I do a little bit of both.
And for context, listeners will be familiar with Samuele Marcora, who was your PhD supervisor. Can you tell us?
I did. Yeah,
tell us about your PhD, what the topic was.
Yeah. Like when I studied sports science as my undergraduate degree, and then I did a master in exercise physiology and rehabilitation. And this is when I started to be more interested about the central process of fatigue. And for this reason, I decided to engage into a PhD in combination between the sports science department and the neurophysiology department in Bangor University. And Samuele Marcora was one of my supervisors. So my PhD topic was basically to understand the effect of mental fatigue or the effect of like cognitive processes on physical performance and on perception of effort.
Yeah, we'll talk about that in a little bit. But first, let's discuss the mindfulness the aspect of athletics, because that's how I first found you and the initial topic that I wanted to talk about. So tell us about the research and as well the practical application of it and what you found.
So basically, because I've been always interested into central process and how this cognitive process can have an effect on physical performance, although I started by studying the effect of mental fatigue, I was always interested in other type of topics, even more like psychological topics. I was interested in self-talk, for example, and I was interested in mindfulness meditation, which is a type of practice who basically store into the sport world, I think, 15 years, I would say, at least. I mean, it's there for far longer than this, but let's say in the last 10, 15 years, there's been this storm about the importance of using those type of meditation and how those can be applied into the sport domain. While I was working at the Olympic Committee in Denmark, we had this chance to run a research with the under 19 handball national team, and basically we did a study seeing the effect of 6 weeks of mindfulness training on physical and cognitive performance in athletes. And it was very interesting because at the end of the study, basically we saw that the group engaging into the mindfulness meditation, they improved not only their physical ability. Basically, we're talking about a specific test created for the handball sport, but also like a more generic one, like for example, like sprinting with decision making. On top of this one, we also saw that they improved from a cognitive perspective. So they were more capable to sustain a high mental load than with certain cognitive tasks that we use to assess this. And as a third, and I found it one of the most important parts as well, is that on a social perspective, all the athletes engaged into the mindfulness training, they improved. Like they improved into the score in schools, they improve into the social settings at home. So this basically makes this type of intervention like an all-around win-win situation.
How big were the effects that you saw? Like if you measured, can it be measured in percentage improvements or something like that on the different levels, the athletic and cognitive and social?
Yeah, I think. I'm trying to. On the top of my mind, I think that in terms of a cognitive performance, I think they improve around 15% more compared to the control. Actually, there was quite a big improvement, but not completely unexpected compared to previous studies.
Yep.
In terms of physical performance, the mindfulness group, it was on average 8-9% better than the placebo control. And I think the type of the type of physical task that we decided to apply had a very heavy decision-making process.
So can you describe
attributes?
Can you describe the task a little bit more so that we understand it?
So one of the tasks, basically, it was what is called like basically it's a sprinting exercise. So basically, you need to sprint for 5 meters, and at the end of the sprint, there was like different lights. It's a kind of traffic lights you have it like in front of you, which lights up in 3 different directions. So once you sprint at all out speed, then when you pass like I call it like at a base light, these traffic lights they light up, and you need basically to go where the lights tells you. So you can go either straight or right or left. And so basically they were doing this one multiple times continuously. And the very interesting part was that the people engaging into the mindfulness, they did not improve their sprinting ability, the 5 meters all out, because I do believe this is a very also peripheral aspect. So like it really depends also from your physical training. But they did much better into their ability to process the signal and decide where to go.
Yeah, interesting.
So on average, they were 8-9% faster in deciding where they need to go based on a stimulus.
Yeah.
Clearly, the stimulus in this case is a light, is not like an opponent. But this is, I think, we tested this one on the handball pitch, on the handball court. So, but we could not have an opponent deciding. So sometimes you use it where you have. But this was very interesting aspect because it's basically involved more the decision making process and less like the actually peripheral muscle power aspect, because the sprint did not change. In a second battery of physical test, they were doing a kind of very specific test where they were simulating how they're supposed to defending. So basically, they were in a position, and in front of them there are like 5 lights in a semicircle. And based on when the lights light up, they needed to go run to the lights, touch it, and coming back to this main base point where they are. And they need to do this multiple times. The tricky part was that we made a rule that the lights on the left, they need to be touched with the right hand, and the lights on the right, they need to be touched with the left hand. This is because this is how you cover in handball when the attackers come to you. Don't know if you can try to picture, but it's basically when the attacker coming on your left, you need to cover with your right hand, otherwise he goes inside in the center and his chances to score increase. So by doing this type of a protocol, which is an adaptation of an already validated protocol, you had a chance not only to assess how fast they respond based on the lights, but also the amount of mistake they do with the hands when they start being tired, because there were mistakes.
And was this second test, was it also more cognitively demanding than physical?
Yeah.
So would you think that the improvements were?
Yeah. I think this was very highly physical demanding and cognitive demanding, because the amount of times they needed to touch the lights were actually quite a lot, and they had very little rest in between, so it was a very anaerobic exercise. But the point was this: like most of the intervention that we did in this type of research, and in general in the research I'm doing with the athletes, it's usually aim not only at seeing an improvement when you're fresh, but to see how you respond when you're already tired, because this is where you see the difference between the people winning and the people losing.
Yeah, no, that's a perfect setup and methodology for that sport and for other team sports. Now, of course, what the listeners now will be thinking is that we're triathletes, and a lot of our races are just, you're biking on a road and there's nobody in front of you. You just have to keep 12 meters to the next cyclist, and you don't have an opponent trying to score against you. So, do you think there is any benefit for endurance athletes with mindfulness, and is there research from that of in that area, in the pure, more physical aspects of performance?
I think there is at the moment there is a lack of direct evidence. So that if you do a mindfulness training, this can or cannot help like an endurance athletes. But there is a lot of evidence that prove how mindfulness has an effect on other type of emotion emotion regulation processes, that they are very important for the endurance athletes. Because you need to remember that even when you decided when you decided to do, for example, a triathlon competition where you have 3 sports like swimming, cycling, running, you know already that when you get to your running, you will be tired from the cycling, you will be tired from the swimming. Into the first 2 steps, there is a lot of decision to take, and the interesting part is that your ability to perceive how much effort you do in this, like the perception of effort, it's very heavily dependent also of how much tired you are from all the decision that you took during the first 2 steps for the last one. Mindfulness is very interesting because what it does, it makes your brain like more, it's like to more efficient. Like it allows you to not to focus on one thing and to exclude all the possible variables that basically are only a disturbance for you. And this is very important because I call it reduce the noise. It reduces the noise of the environment into you, and it allow you to focus more into the moment, into what you're doing. And this one I think is very beneficial over time because it allows your brain not to, let's say, not to deplete this kind of, let's call it energy. This is not correct scientifically, but I think for the audience it makes sense. This energy that you have for regulating your pacing based on your perception of effort or based on your opponent. And there is a lot of decision to take even when you're swimming. So where you need to position yourself, if you decided that you need to sprint a little bit more, the same in the biking, because you prepare the swimming and the biking to make sure that you arrive there in front in the pack with everyone to start running. Does it make sense?
When you said that about, yes, it does. And when you said that about running when you're already tired from the swim and the bike, it brought my mind to all the negative talks that tend to creep in unless you are really good at suppressing those negative thoughts and you actively using positive self-talk yourself. And that brings us to mindfulness. That's I guess it's non-judgmental awareness. Is what it's often described as, right? And to be able to I guess perceive what you're doing without attaching any judgment to it. I'm not feeling good or bad, and
what ends up happening is you try to be
that we feel bad when we're not bad.
And you try to be objective. Exactly.
Even when we don't need to.
You try to be objective in the situation where you're in, and this is very important. I think it's something that has been talked even before for many years. So how you come back from either a defeat or how you come back from running like a cycling part where you didn't end up like where you were supposed to, and then you start dwelling into the negative thoughts that your competition might not be as good as you expected. And all these thoughts in reality, they will accumulate into your brain, and they will make you even more mentally tired, and they will increase automatically even your level of fatigue. So mindfulness in this perspective, it can be very handy because it can first allow you to get out from a negative mood and put yourself back into a positive one. So basically it can help you if something went wrong into your race and you need to go back into your positive mode, or let's say a more objective mode, to decide which decision you need to take. And at the same time, it can help you when you're already tired, because it will happen, to avoid this negative self-talk that comes into your brain automatically. And it's very powerful, because for people that knows a lot about fatigue or mental fatigue, it's very tricky, mental fatigue, because when you're mentally tired, many things happens. So your emotion is completely upside down. Your mood is very strange. Your ability, your perceived ability, so your ability to perceive how good you are in doing what you're doing is completely altered. So you really might feel that you are not capable to do what you are about to do. And that's very tricky. That's very tricky. It's tricky for the athletes, it's tricky for normal people, it's tricky for military personnel. And it's something that it does not always come up like, oh, I'm mentally tired. No, you only see the effect of this. You only see the bad mood. You only see this emotional upside down. You only see this low self-confidence. Okay, so you can explain it from a psychological perspective, but it can be explained also from a neurophysiological perspective.
Yeah, that is very interesting.
And in this domain, mindfulness helps you in all of these aspects.
Yeah, I thought of another example that might be useful, and tell me if you agree or not. But I'm thinking that in a period of just heavy training, or even training in general, a lot of endurance athletes, especially, I think, are very, very obsessed almost with doing really well every time in every workout. And if we don't have the perfect workout, then we get sort of in a bad mood, and we can't be sort of objective to our workouts, and then that can negatively cause a negative spiral. Whereas if we could be a bit more detached from the outcome of a single workout, then that will help us on the whole, in the big picture and the grand scheme of things, have a better training period with less negativity and less used, I guess, mental resources, because we are so upset about not performing every workout as perfectly as we would ideally like to.
Yeah, I think this is a sorry.
No, sorry, go on.
So I think this is a little bit the the damnation of the perfectionist people, I say. Like, you making a plan that you're trying to follow as much as you can. Sometimes it's not always possible, I think, because training is also including like moments and period where you realize that you're not able to do something because you're either too tired, or because you're too stressed, or because some other events in your life are there. And I think your ability to accept that this is can happen, like it happens to anyone. It's not that some people, even the strongest athletes in the world, are not people that they never miss a training session, not at all. But actually, if I must say, some of the athletes that are like on the top in the league in marathon, for example, are athletes that know exactly when it's time also to slow down. So they're not always on the top all the time, because you cannot. And also they realize when they are trying to push in a lot into a training session, but it's not working out. It's getting really tiring. So then they decided to slow down or to change the type of training at that moment. And this is very important, because it might make you realize that you might have some other problems, so you might be a little bit in overreaching, or you might be in overtraining. So I think the ability to know what's going on with your body, with your mind, I think it overcomes your obsession to always want to be onto this training plan that you created, that maybe is working in a perfect environment, but it cannot be applied always.
Yeah, exactly. So if you talk about how to actually do mindfulness, what sort of protocols or do you recommend, and what should the normal everyday athlete do? Should they use apps, or is there something more specific?
Yeah, okay. So I can tell you what we did for the research, which I think it was a very nice combination. We had a frontal lecture, frontal teachings at the beginning, for 3 days, and then we had a once a week a kind of coming back still with this frontal teacher for the guys. And at the same time, at home, they were using an app to actually make sure that they were comply with the training. The app was very handy to help you, to get into the state, so to do, okay, I need to do it, I'm going to use the app, because some of the apps, they have this voice that basically accompany you through the process. And I think if it's done properly, it can be very handy. ideally, in an ideal world, if you're someone who meditates or does meditation in a center, like in a certified center, like 3 times a week, 5 times a week, and then you learn how to do it by yourself home, even without the app, this clearly can be like the perfect world. But the app in general, it simplify life sometimes, and it helps you in case you have a very heavy schedule.
I think having a heavy schedule is something that is true for 95% of the people listening to this. So what is the time requirement of this? Like if we assume that it's somebody that does not go to a center, they're basically left to their own devices, what would you say that they should do?
Yeah, I mean, I think the effect we saw, it was really interested even from just 10-20 minutes every day of mindfulness meditation. Also because you might be very surprised to see how much people really are not able to focus or staying into this moment for more than 60 seconds. So when you manage to do for 20 minutes, you might not notice, but into your brain, you're really changing something. I mean, it's been also proven with neurophysiological studies with fMRI. You're doing a big favor to your brain. In particular, in nowadays society, where your ability to focus and concentrate on one thing for more than 20 seconds, it's very rare. It doesn't look like, but it's very rare. So when you decided to engage into something like this, for 10 minutes, for 15 minutes, you're really doing a big training, even if it's just every day.
But you think the everyday aspect is important? Like 2 or 3 times a week is probably not enough, is it? It needs to be more consistent.
No, yeah, but you start. As a start, if you've never done it, it might be difficult already to do 60 seconds.
Yeah.
So clearly over time, ideally, mindfulness can be done every day, 20 minutes, 30 minutes, whoever has the time to do. And I think because I know the athletes in general, I have this experience because many people came to me when I was a sport physiologist. Oh, we can do this for the athletes, we can do this. So the athletes are clearly bombarded with 100 new things that they can do to improve their training every month, I would say. So the problem was, okay, what do I do? What do I use? Of all these 100 things, because I cannot use all of them, they give me the best effect. So let's say I have 10 new training protocol that I can use, and I have 10 new psychological intervention that I can use, but the athlete has only time for 2. So which one do you choose? The point that I have, and I told you before about this physical aspect, the cognitive aspect, the social aspect, is that mindfulness training, it's really, really effective in many domains of the athletes. It's effective not only in their performance, it's effective in the recovery aspect, it's effective in the mental health aspect, and it's effective in the social aspect. And this is a lot of effect, believe me, compared to other type of training that you do only because they make you go faster.
Yeah, that is actually a very, very good point there. That the return on investment is goes way beyond.
Yeah, exactly. And this, and any cross border with other domain, with nutrition, with the physical performance. So I mean, that's why it makes it, I think, very worth it. It's a 20 minutes a day, 30 minutes a day, very worth it, because it's not only something to do with your sport.
Yeah.
It's something to do with your life.
It's fascinating. As a podcast junkie, I listen to a lot of different podcasts, and one of the ones a lot of listeners probably also listen to, the Tim Ferriss podcast. He just interviews a lot of successful people from various domains. It can be sports, it can be business, it can be creative arts or authors, anything really. And the amount of people that he interviews that mention meditation as one of the key things that they do every day to keep up a high level of performance in whatever it is they're doing, it's really incredible. It just shows anecdotally, I think, that there's definitely something to it.
Yeah, clearly.
So let's move on to one final question about this. If if the listeners start out with an app to help them get started, do you have a recommendation for an app that you think is good?
Okay. I mean, I can tell you which one I used, which I think they did a pretty good job. And I think I used two app. One is big, like worldwide, and this is like Headspace,
Mhm.
which has also a sport um, into the app. You have a different area,
Yep.
like where you can work on, and one of the area is actually sport performance. It was a new a new features that they introduced right after the Rio Olympic Games. So I know
Yep.
the athletes were using during Rio, and then Headspace had this program after.
Yep.
This is on top of my mind, and this is like it's very well known app where I use this app to run the study I did. And I think it's very handy. Clearly, it's for English speakers, just
Yep.
for you to know. And another one I came across while I was in Australia was a Smiling Mind, which is a little bit smaller. Smiling Mind, yeah. See, which is a little bit smaller, but it was a nice concept. I don't know the others for judging, because I'm sure there are like many valuable one around, and so, but on top of my mind and has experience, I use those one, and I found they are very handy because they have a lot of programs that you can follow, and some of them are very specific for athletes.
Yeah, great.
So,
Let's get into a separate topic, and this will be more about mental fatigue. As you mentioned, you worked on that in your PhD. So can you basically talk about that whole concept and describe it a little bit, and then we'll jump into questions from there.
Yeah. Okay. So now, when I was doing my master, 2006, I started being very interested, like as my supervisor was suggesting me to look into mental fatigue, because mental fatigue it's very interesting aspect on everyday life in human people. You know, I mean, from like a textbook this definition, you say this is psychobiological states of tiredness that makes your brain foggy, you know, and it makes you basically slow down in many aspects. Like it makes slow down your ability to make decision, makes slow down your ability to react to things. He has a very negative effect on your mood, on your motivation as well. So it's been found out that people are mentally tired are constantly demotivated to engage into certain behaviors that can be like physical activity, for example. Because I was very interested, because we always used to define physical activity like a behavior in human being. So this is very handy way to approach the problem, or like this concept of mental fatigue, because people with mental fatigue, they have a problem in follow certain behaviors. Like in this case, in our case, we were interested in physical activity. And mental fatigue, like it's a big thing in sport, although it's one of the things that is there but people don't talk, or is there but people don't notice, because they think they're doing everything correct, and the athletes arrived at the day of the race not mentally tired or super fresh, because they think that sleeping at night nicely means you're not mentally tired. So but then or they thought that mental fatigue would not have such a big impact on physical performance. So, well, we did a study, like the first one that I published with my supervisor, and we proved that the people that were mentally tired had like a reduction in cycling performance of 16%. And from that point on, there was many different research groups that they address a similar problem. So they try to see how mental fatigue has an effect on different sport, like on running, on kayaking, on rowing, or football. You know, a constant in all the study, or in 90% of the study, it was the people mentally tired basically had a reduction in performance. Either it was an endurance performance because the perception of effort was altered, or it was like a reduction in performance in some kind of technical skills due, for example, like in football. So it became a big thing, and that's why a lot of people started to put a little bit more attention on it.
And this is very established now, right? There's quite a lot of studies on this.
Yeah, because the people there are some people that still question because the number of studies are not a lot, and this is true because I think we are now nearly 40 studies. The problem is that some people don't take into account of 20-25 years of literature that prove how mental fatigue has an effect on cognitive processes, and this has been established far earlier than when we decided to see the effect on directly on physical performance, because studies on pilots, they prove that mental fatigue has a very heavy effect on their ability to drive cars, or planes. But this is very well established even far earlier than when we started see the effect on the physical activity. A funny anecdote is that before me and my supervisor, we did the study. Like the only guy who did the study was like a famous Italian physiologist, like at the end of the 19th centuries. So it's a way like he waited 100 years to get back into Italian hands to repropose.
Yeah, that's really funny, and I think that Samuele mentioned that because he did this sort of finger weightlifting exercise.
Yeah, Angelo. It was Angelo Mosso, the physiologist. Yeah.
Yeah.
So.
That's a funny story. So listeners should go back and listen to the one with Samuele where he talked about that experiment. What about the magnitude? You mentioned 16% in your first study.
The magnitude depends on the study you do, the protocols that you have been used. For example, like we have seen it that you have the effect. It's big in, for example, in protocols where basically you need to decide when you can stop. So, for example, when you do what we call a time to exhaustion test, where we put a fixed power and we ask you to cycle as much as you can, it's where you see a good effect, because this is really depends on your ability to how you perceive the effort on the power. If you do a time trial, it's a little bit different though, because clearly you are constrained by the time or the space, depending. And still though, if your perception of effort is altered, you see the gears that you choose to pedal, like it's different because you are basically more tired. So basically you think that you're starting with the proper gears, but then you realize that it's very heavy and it's not always related to something at the muscular level.
But if you do a time trial test rather than a time to exhaustion test, what sort of percentage?
You weigh the percentage between 1 and 5.
Okay, yeah. So
it's a more locked type of test.
Yeah,
I would say.
Yeah, and that's usually even with training interventions, you see the same effect that you have bigger magnitudes in time to exhaustion tests usually than in time trial tests.
Yeah.
Anyway, okay, but so how, for example, in our modern world, does mental fatigue arise? If you can talk about that, both from a practical standpoint, but also what's going on inside our brains? What's the mechanism behind that?
Yeah, okay, so that's a very good question, and that's what they're trying to understand. The things that we can see first, if we talk in our daily in our daily life, and I remember I did when I was in Denmark, I did a commercial for a gym, like discussing why going to the gym in the evening could feel more effortful because people were tired from the day spent into the office. So, and this is why, to reconnect to your question, like in a daily life, a whole day of working in front of a computer can make you mentally tired.
Yeah.
In particular, if your day of work has been also very stressful, or you had and if you had some arguments with your boss, which puts you in a very bad mood, and then I think you have your perfect mix of mental fatigue from where you try to engage into your physical activity. Clearly, if you are an athlete, it's a little bit it might be a little bit different because you might get used to a little bit to it because you know really the type of training you're gonna do. But if you are like a normal person, you'll see that people really disengage completely to go into the gym or to do the sport that they were supposed to. Because when you're mentally tired, also your ability to decide, which is based on also on like your effort, is okay. How much effort do I need to put into go into the gym? Okay, so this question raised into your head when you're mentally tired, and usually you disengage and say, I think I go home. Okay, because this is what mental fatigue has an effect on. Also, your ability to make decision is called effort-based decision-making processes. So basically, it's your ability to decide based on the effort that you're gonna take, which is a common human characteristic. So if you think about it, you choose anything in life based on what is the reward you can get and how much effort you need to put. This is actually even in the animal world. This is how they decide when they need to move. They move for hunting because the reward is it's a survival, or they move for escaping, which is the same.
Yeah.
So, and you translate it into our world, and although we clearly are like we have a different brain, but some things are still the same.
And I guess short-term bias increases so that we tend to make the decisions that are more rewarding or feel more rewarding in the short term, even though in the long term they might be not as good for us.
Or maybe like we make the decision that they cause us less effort at the moment or less pain at the moment.
Yeah.
And clearly maybe might not be good for our long-term perspective.
Yeah.
And to come back to your question about what happens in the brain, when we ran some studies using caffeine to try to understand the combination or what can be involved, that was very interesting because caffeine has this ability to basically cancel out the effect of mental fatigue, and this is because the caffeine has an effect on the adenosinergic system, and this is also something that we might believe could be some kind of neurophysiological basis of mental fatigue. So it's because there is not a lot of studies done to actually see exactly what is going on. We can only see like either side effect or indirect results. For example, studies with caffeine prove that the effect of mental fatigue is completely cancel out, and this could be due also because of this accumulation of adenosine in certain sites in the brain. So when you ingest caffeine, the caffeine is binding on this receptor, and it doesn't allow the adenosine to bind and accumulate. At the same time, we noticed that people that are more or less mentally tired has this change in perception of effort. And perception of effort, and then we saw that there were certain area of the brain, in particular the one involved in this effort-based decision-making process that I tell you, and those areas were more activated. So in this case, I see that the mental fatigue increase or decrease the RPE, and I see increasing or decreasing of activation in those areas. So So it's very like they still like we are still in very at the beginning of this type of research, but we are trying to unlock and try to understand better, because if we do understand the mechanism, we can try to find a way to counteract.
Yeah. And
yeah.
So can you go into that then? Because caffeine, but it might not be the best idea to rely on caffeine too much to counter
Yeah.
that. What are the other ways that we can use to maybe avoid mental fatigue in the first place, but then when we have it, to try to manage it?
Yeah, avoid mental fatigue. I mean, that's. I think.
Minimize.
So I'm working now on what I call a cognitive recovery strategy. So basically, it's a combination of strategies that you use when you're either mentally tired or like you say, to try to reduce mentally, like mental fatigue. One of those one, for example, like that it seems to work in altering perception of effort when you start being tired. Like we were talking before about this positive self-talk. Okay, positive self-talk is actually working. So it's one of the few psychological interventions that actually does work, and it has this effect on reducing the RPE, the perception of effort, in particular when you're tired. And definitely is working. Yeah. I'm working personally now on some type of sounds. We call it like binaural beat sounds.
Yep.
Which seems to be type of sounds that somehow relieve the negative effect on mental fatigue. We published a study and we submitted another one now, purely into the cognitive domain, though, to see how people that are mentally tired, then when they need to engage into another cognitive task, but they've been listening to these binaural beats, they still can perform as good as at the beginning before they were actually mentally tired.
Are you aware of Are you aware of these apps? Browser-based apps, like there's one called brain.fm, and there are some other ones as well. You know, they're kind of like music, but not exactly music, just rhythmic music.
Yeah. And some of them, I think they have some binaural feature, I think.
Yeah, I think some of them do.
Yeah. Clearly, I mean, I don't know, because I've been using when I use them for my studies, I choose some that are validated because we created by ourselves, and with the group in Denmark, we are trying to put together a kind of app that has those validated sound, which can be handy for like focus and concentration, or reducing mental fatigue, or for increasing your easiness to fall asleep, for example.
Yeah.
And it's a very interesting concept overall. It's just that there is more research to do into it, I think.
And you're saying that right now there isn't really anything out there that has been validated, that is publicly available?
No, I'm actually with Sam, when we decided to do the brain endurance training. Basically we decided to use those mental fatigue stimulus as a training. This like into the study that we did in 2014-15 with the help of the Ministry of Defense, we showed that basically the people became more resilient to fatigue. So this is, let's say, it's a long-term solution for trying to become more resilient to fatigue. And recently I did a few more studies, and two are already submitted so I have the posters and the presentation in the conference of this year at the ACSM and the CSS, and I submitted the articles. And basically this brain endurance training, so to do this let's say this mental fatigue in task during your training, your physical training, or straight after your physical training, it seems to create an adaptation that can improve your performance. I have very good data with the football players and with cyclists.
Yeah.
So
that's very interesting, and I remember talking with Samuele about that as well. And actually, Yeah, I think that he is developing an application for that, or I don't know if it's even potentially finished.
Yeah, there are actually many applications around where you can look. I know Alex made an article. I think
I read
but
that.
but it was on the outside the newspaper, the physical newspaper. Did you read that?
Not in
I
the
think
physical
I have it
newspaper,
somewhere.
but I think that he also has it in the online newspaper, in the outside online.
Because I in the last years, like I've been also working as a consultant with some of those apps that they wanted to have a kind of feedback on if they were doing like a good job in having. So if you want, you can find at least there are a couple of apps that that they're actually working delivering this this brain endurance training concept. One is already out, another one will be out in March, and Sam is working on one like self-made, like inside the university. This is as far as I know.
And how much of brain endurance training do you need to do? What is the typical protocol if you are going to try to do that?
Okay, that's a very good question, because when I started doing the studies, like after Sam in the last 2 years, I realized straight away, also as a sport physiologist, that you cannot apply huge amount of this cognitive stimulus on athletes, because athletes do not have extra 6 hours a week to actually doing this type of intervention. But then we decided to basically reduce the amount of time, but put this time in a much more clever way. We realized that the effect of the cognitive training would be higher if you are already tired. So the first time that we tried, I was in Denmark, and we used the national badminton players that they have. Actually, we're talking people that are on the top 10 in the world. And the idea was that they were engaging into the normal training routine, physical training routine, and then they had into the moment where they were having a break, they were engaging into doing the brain endurance training. Back then, we were very rudimental with computers. They were no app yet. But there was like for 2 minutes, so they had a 2 minutes break between session on court, and at the end of the training session, they would get an extra 20 or 30 minutes. Then it was effective, because they were already tired, and on top of when they were tired, you will give them 30 minutes.
And how many days per week did they do this?
They did 3 times a week.
Okay.
And this effective was actually from feedback that we got for them. At the beginning, it was rather powerful. So the first week, they said they were completely devastated. So the first time they tried, they say like they went home and say the brain was like dead. So they say like, usually I go home, I have a shower, I can cook. No, they said I went home and I collapsed on the couch. Clearly, you might have different effect depending on different people. Exactly.
What about, you have some interesting studies as well where you have looked at how professional athletes react to endurance training and to mental fatigue. Is there a big difference there? And does that mean, can we infer from that endurance training itself is a way of practicing your fatigue resistance to mental fatigue?
Yeah, okay. So we ran a study like 4 years ago, where we tried to compare the elite cyclists versus amateur cyclists to see if the elite cyclists were a little bit better or not in resist to mental fatigue. And we were inducing only 30 minutes of mental fatigue, and the amateur cyclists basically reduced their effect, the effect of the cycling performance, and the elite athletes no. And into the discussion, one of the idea we had, like one of the explanation, was exactly what you say. The type of training that they do, in a way, it makes you also more mental resilient. And this is true, because even if you look at special forces training, like they do certain type of training, certain type of physical training that definitely has an effect on their ability to respond to threats or to respond to fatigue. So this is very well documented. The point is, can you find another way to train them apart from using only the physical one? Because when you train them only physically, you reach a point where you cannot add more, because otherwise you risk that people go into overtraining. But you can find cognitive stimulus that you can add on top of your physical training. So clearly, some categories of people, like elite athletes or like special forces, they're already more resilient than normal people, because the type of training they do, the type of life they have, or probably also the genetics. Because when you deal with elite athletes, they are, I don't know, with the team who is into the national team of some country, you're already talking about people that have been like selected over a big population of cyclists. So those are the best of the best. So probably there is a combination of heavy training, genetics, which makes them also more resilient to fatigue. The question is, can this be trained even further? Yes, it can, because after all, they're still humans. So they're not aliens like a lot of people believe.
Yeah.
So the point is, like I said before, is not that I go around and I do BT with all my athletes. It's actually quite the opposite, because people get very surprised that I do a lot of physical intervention, as much as or even more than the cognitive intervention. Because they call me the mental fatigue guy, they forget that I'm also a sport physiologist. So anyway, the point is that there are some people that are prone to be more mentally tired. Like there are people that are prone to have problem with their attention. There are people that have difficulties to focus. Okay, so you can see even those effects into the real life, into performance. Like you have people that have problem. I have cyclists who has problem when there are 3/4 of a race, cycling race. They have problem to stay into the pack, how to position themselves, because they're starting being tired and everything, like it goes upside down. And then we do some tests, and then we see that these people can barely like do 30 seconds or any type of cognitive test. And so then what we do with people like those ones, we engage in doing the training, because we do believe that the training might be handy, or the effect of the training might be more relevant than if they do something else.
Yeah.
So like discussing, like coming back to what we said about the efficiency of a type of training that you want to use with your athletes. So you have your choice of 10 training protocols, because you got 10 new things you want to try. Which one would be the one that give you more effect for the time that you're going to use it? And so this is something that carefully the coach decide with the athletic trainer or the physiologist.
Makes sense. Is there anything else related to the things that we discussed here that you want to add before we move into the rapid fire questions? Anything that we've missed?
No, I think one thing that it's very important to underline is that like there's this heavy connection between mental fatigue and emotion regulation, and like I said before, this perceived ability concept. So, and all this mood alteration. So I think it's always very, very important the people that are interested, or people that they are trying to track the training they do, that they never forget to try to find ways to track also how they feel emotionally from a mood perspective, because these are very influenced by the mental fatigue and the other way around. and also with the motivation. I think this is really important because some people think that they are completely disconnected. It's not true.
Yeah.
So actually, you might realize that. So, and this is where, for example, like doing mindfulness in general, it might makes you more aware of what is going on in you. Another reason why doing mindfulness can be handy. So it makes you more aware of things going on into your body or into your mind, and how you can try to counteract or find a solution for it. Because I think the ability of an athlete is also to feel himself, herself, and try to understand what is going on and try to know themselves a little bit more. Because then you can really like update and make your type of training better and better. Because I think a training that tailored for you, even if it does not include as much high intensity session like you wanted, or as much a specific session that you think they were very good for you, but then it's tailored for you, and then you are able to recover properly, you are able to sleep properly, then this one became more effective on the long run than the heavy training that you try to push yourself into it, that maybe doesn't fit your style, it doesn't fit your characteristic. Because you can put some people on a track and tell them to do like 10 times 1 kilometers and a certain pace and do always the same. But some of the people, they cannot, they hate this routine. And you need to take into account this always. Because it might be less beneficial to force him into doing this one than actually doing something different. Something different that can be less high intensity, but then it became more effective. And then it goes all together. So you have your physical part, your mental fatigue, your emotion, your mood, your perceived ability, because it became a circle and it goes all together.
Yeah, absolutely. And I have to give a plug here because it fits so perfectly with, I love the app HRV for training, because you can measure your HRV, which is obviously a physiological parameter of importance for athletes, but it also prompts you to rate things like your mood, your motivation, your mental energy, and all of these things. And that's a perfect example of how you can track your mental state and emotional state, and see catch any red flags that might be coming up before it becomes too serious.
Yeah, exactly. Also, because heart rate variability has been into the radar of many companies, so and that's why you can find now in many of these new devices coming up that you can measure heart rate variability, because it's also nice. It's a good indicator of your level of stress. Or your good indicator, or it's a side indicator of how you sleep, for example.
Yeah. So let's move into the rapid fire questions, and I want you to answer with one sentence or less. And the first one is, what's your favorite book, blog, or resource related to endurance sports or any of your field of expertise, so to say?
Yeah, I must say, because that's very it's not difficult, because I was very impressed when Alex Hutchinson came up with the book Endure, because in a way he synthesized the type of research I've been doing for 10 years. But I must say there is a book who's also doing very well, that I love it when I read it, and it was The Playmaker Advantage by Dan Peterson, which is also talks about the implication of neuroscience into sport performance. I strongly suggest to read the book.
I will.
Also because
I will do that.
Yeah, in a way, discusses well the type of research we did, which I think is very interesting in the last years.
It goes on my list. I've never heard of it, but it goes on my list immediately.
Yeah.
What's a personal habit that's helped you achieve success?
But success, can be many things. But personally, I think it really depends on the type of person you are. For a person like me, I'm always I have these racing thoughts. I call it like problem / advantage. I don't know. It depends, because I have millions of things coming up into my mind. I'm interested in many, many, many things. I want to get a hold of many things, and clearly there is no time. So what I think I found very, very handy, it was actually to do meditation, because you really allow to channel my energy into and focus on the few things I have to do at the moment, and automatically I became more efficient. And I would couple this one with a very good sleep routine, because sleeping, it's a thing that people underestimate heavily. But then, and this doesn't mean that the routine has to be like 11:6, or you need to wake up at 4, because I'm not a fan to give it a time. It really depends what kind of life you're living. You can also go to bed at 2 o'clock at night, and you can wake up at 9. This is your routine. But having a routine, like, or taking care of your sleeping habits to make sure that they are the best, I think it's priceless, because you gain a lot of time during the day, and you gain a lot of like fresh brain to work into things that makes you faster and more effective.
Yeah.
I think those are two habits that personally they really made a difference.
I'm currently reading Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker. It's such an amazing book. Would probably be my answer right now to my favorite book related to endurance sports.
Yeah, and I think you can now I'm interested in this power nap, or these recovery pods or recovery area. I'm trying to make a recovery area in my office or something like this. Because I think it become very effective.
Yeah. And finally, what do you wish you had known or done differently at some point in your career?
In my career, because I don't have a strong career as an athlete, but I remember I've been training heavily a lot physically, and if I knew before better the importance of the psychological aspect, I would have probably also put much more attention on that one, because during the race, many times happens that I failed to achieve the target that I wanted, and I couldn't understand what was the reason. I think in the last 20 years, there's been more involvement of sports psychology in it, and I think this is clarify a lot of things.
Yeah.
I think this is something that I would have had more,
and
I wanted to know more.
Yeah, absolutely. And tell us where the listeners can follow you and your work if they want to see what's going on and what new stuff you're putting out there.
Yeah. This is what I'm trying to working on, because I'm very bad in posting things, and I should, because people realize I do a lot of things, but they don't know where to find me. But in general, I try my best to post things on LinkedIn. And I've recently opened my Instagram, but there is nothing yet. So I'm trying my best also to post pictures and things happening there. But in general, if you go on my LinkedIn, I post a lot of articles or a lot of things happening, in what I do.
Right.
So if you follow my LinkedIn, it should be fine.
Right.
And I try my best to be more proactive into.
Yeah. Thank you so much for your time, Walter. It's been super interesting, and a pleasure talking to you and learning so much about this fascinating area.
Oh, that was my pleasure. Thank you for inviting me.
So I hope that you enjoyed that episode as much as I enjoyed talking to Walter. As you noticed, if you're a long-time listener, and I mean a very long-time listener, this was pretty much an update on the topics that we originally covered way back 2.5 years ago with the Professor Samuele Marcora. It is well worth re-listening to that episode 17. If this one caught your interest, you'll get more of the same topics and from a slightly different angle. So really, really great listen to that one as well. One thing that I wanted to mention here that Walter and I discussed after the interview was the brain endurance training apps that Walter mentioned. He didn't mention them by name in the interview, but then I asked about them, and it turns out that the names of these apps, they are available in the app stores, I would assume. They are Soma NPT, and that's SOMA. And the other one is called Rewire, And it's actually not available right now. It was going to be released next year, sometime next year, is what Walter said. And that one sounded pretty exciting in that it's designed to be able to use, for example, on the bike. You just put the phone in a holder on your handlebars, and then you can actually do the brain endurance training that is designed for on the bike training. So pretty cool stuff there. So Soma MPT and Rewire are those two apps that Walter referred to. You can find the show notes for this episode as usual on thattriathlonshow.com, and I'll link to related episodes like the one with Professor Marcora, and also the one I did with Alex Hutchinson on the curiously elastic limits of human performance. Great interview, that one as well. I'll also link to a couple of articles by Alex from the Sweat Science blog that have discussed these topics that we covered today with Walter. In the next episode, I interview Danny Lennon, who is the founder of Sigma Nutrition, probably most well known for the excellent Sigma Nutrition podcast that many of you will for sure be familiar with. It's, in my opinion, the best nutrition podcast out there. Very evidence-based, and I love it. So make sure that you stay subscribed to the podcast and don't miss the Q&As on Thursdays either. I actually get a lot of feedback that a lot of listeners actually think that the Q&A episodes are the most useful of all because they generally tackle specific problems in applied situations, and that can be very helpful to really put context and exemplify some of the topics that we discuss on a perhaps more theoretical level in interviews and general Monday episodes in general. So thank you for that feedback. That's great to hear. Big thanks before we go to our sponsors, Precision Hydration, that you can find on precisionhydration.com. Get your free hydration plan and try your first box or tube of electrolytes for free with the promo code ThatTriathlonShow, all one word, all caps. And thank you to Roka that you can find on roka.com. Check out their wetsuits, swimskins, tri-suits, boys shorts, high-performance eyewear, and many, many other products, and get 20% off your entire order with the promo code TTS, all caps. Thank you, as always, for listening. Keep training smart and keep loving triathlon.